In the early hours of late August 1944, at 07:15 from Observation Post 4 near Pardal, France, the daily briefing sat rumpled on the tabletop, while specialists from Flak Regiment 155W grappled with the baffling figures staring back at them. The destruction figures shattered every axiom of projectile odds drilled into Luftwaffe Academy students throughout the Reich. An 82% takedown rate, that defies belief. Peering through spotter scopes, Wehrmacht spotters had observed phenomena that clashed head-on with assurances from their spy networks regarding British flak defenses. The buzz bombs dispatched at London before sunrise were getting obliterated at levels that begged for answers. These weren't pursuits by interceptors tracing risky arcs through the sky. Nor were they snared in blimp wires, but rather picked apart by ground-based barrages along the shore artillery line. Projectiles bursting with uncanny precision in the vicinity of the drones, somehow triggering blasts close enough to cripple without needing bullseyes. Back at Flak Regiment 155W's base in the Château d'Outreux, Oberst Max Wachtel, overseer of the full V-1 barrage effort, absorbed these dispatches with mounting dread as the Reich's pulse bomb initiative wore on. The share of drones felled by the seaside battery zone had surged from 17% back in June to 74% come the end of August, peaking at 82% on one stunning day that last week of August 1944, a turning point that delivered the deepest tech jolt to the Wehrmacht's armaments experts during the conflict. Unbeknownst to Wachtel or his fellow Reich researchers, they were catching sight of World War II's tightest-held innovations. A breakthrough so groundbreaking it carried safeguards rivaling the Manhattan Project. Dubbed the proximity fuse, or VT for variable time fuse by the Western powers, it was methodically dismantling the Führer's dread device through exactness that Nazi physicists deemed unattainable. The saga traced back 10 weeks prior to June 13, 1944, precisely 7 days post the Normandy landings. Retaliating for the Western Allies' beachhead in France, the Nazi leader had loosed his touted Vergeltungswaffen reprisal arsenal on the British capital. At 4:25 a.m. that Tuesday, the inaugural V-1 struck London, crashing into Grove Road in Bow and wrecking a rail span plus surrounding residences. The toll: 6 fatalities, 30 wounded, and 200 displaced. This gadget embodied years of Teutonic ingenuity. A unmanned flyer propelled by an Argus's 109 Hydro-14 pulse jet motor, hauling 850 kilos of Amitol warhead at 640 kilometers H. It marked humanity's debut guided missile, and Berlin's top brass were convinced it had forced the UK to capitulate. Major Walter Dornberger, steering the V program at Peenemünde, had crunched the numbers. Even assuming a modest 25% hit ratio, the V-1 barrage would dump more tonnage on London than the full 1940-41 air raids. Fabricating each cost around 5,000 Reichsmarks, pennies next to crude bomber ops minus any pilot peril. Over at the Peenemünde Army Lab, the Fatherland's boffins felt justified in their optimism. They'd pioneered cutting-edge rocketry, rolled out working jets, and now unleashed the Pioneer standoff weapon. Dr. Robert Lusser, architect of the V-1 steering setup, had reckoned enemy takedowns as virtually unfeasible. The gadget zipped along at 640 kilometers per hour across heights from 600 to 2,700 meters. RAF planes demanded velocities over 650 kilometers range to catch up. To neutralize it, they'd have to approach inside 200 meters, courting their own demise in the blast. Ground fire. The odds of a dead-on strike against that tiny, swift profile clocked in under 1 per 10,000 rounds expended. This stemmed not from hype, but rigorous trajectory analysis. Standard-timed shells demanded spot-on forecasting, exact math, hand-adjusted settings, and flawless synchronization. Against a V-1's pace, crews had maybe 30 seconds from radar ping to fire. Oberst Max Wachtel, leading Flak Regiment 155W, understood these constraints intimately from his dual vantage in flak ops. Over the push, the Axis fired off 9,121 V-1s from fixed launchers at Britain, plus thousands extra at varied foes, pushing the war's grand total to roughly 25,000 units. Almost immediately after initial salvos, ominous intel filtered to Berlin's analysts. UK flak setups were evolving at an unnervingly rapid clip. By June's close, destroy rates had jumped from 10% to 24%, above forecasts, yet rationalizable. August brought the real puzzle, with data turning downright bizarre. Flak monitors tracking performance spotted British batteries logging V-1 downs with shockingly frugal shell usage. Scouts along the Norman shore saw steady-bound V-1S en route to the Isles abruptly ringed by shell puffs, only to spiral earthward even though the detonations seemed too distant for clean strikes. Hidden from Nazi recon, this was the proximity fuse in action, converting glancing blows into fatal ones. The device had entered service. Proximity fuses had been in use across the Pacific Theater, starting from January 1943, when the USS Helena downed a Japanese dive bomber using shells that detonated upon detecting nearby targets. German intelligence overlooked this entirely. The Oslo report from November 1939 had referenced work on proximity fuses, yet German researchers brushed it off as bogus information. Though Germany pursued comparable innovations, more than 30 prototypes were explored without any reaching deployment. German technicians ultimately decided that such fuses were unfeasible. The engineering hurdles appeared too daunting, shrinking radio transmitters and receivers for shell casings, ensuring vacuum tubes endured 20,000 G-forces, designing batteries that would function after prolonged inactivity, and scaling up for widespread manufacturing. Nevertheless, by August 1944, U.S. facilities were churning out 40,000 VT fuses each day. In the last week of that month, these devices hit their highest impact. The British revamped their full anti-aircraft setup. Artillery units integrated American SCR-584 radar for automated target following. Even more vital, they launched projectiles fitted with VT fuses adapted precisely for countering V-1s. The Royal Artillery and RAF Regiment shifted from north-down sites to the south coast, forming a dense barrage line. This seaside deployment meant faulty rounds would drop into the ocean, avoiding any risk of German recovery. Once V-1s breached the English shoreline, they faced a lethal corridor where advanced tech overrode sheer odds. The SCR-584 radar swiftly acquired incoming threats, computed paths, and relayed data for precise barrages. Inside the VT fuse, tiny radio emitters, crafted with tubes from Sylvania Electric and Western Electric, operated continuously. Upon detecting echoed signals from close range, Theratron mechanisms ignited the charges, shredding V-1 airframes with shrapnel. During the height of operations in late August, shoreline batteries neutralized 82% of approaching V-1s, a figure that German specialists viewed as mechanically unattainable. Accounts of this 82% success rate sparked urgent sessions at German command centers. WTEL pondered internal betrayal. Urgent reviews uncovered no defects in the weapons. Trials conducted over home soil confirmed standard reliability. The issue arose solely against UK countermeasures. German analysts inferred that the British possessed groundbreaking air defense methods, though they lacked concrete evidence absent seized samples. Attempts to adapt included altering flight paths, heights, swarm sizes, nocturnal releases, and leveraging storms. All proved futile. The destruction rate stayed ruthlessly high. At Peenemünde, researchers grappled with a troubling realization. If the Allies wielded proximity fuses, they had conquered what Germany believed beyond reach. Efforts to expose this mystery ramped up but yielded zero results. Security around the VT fuses proved exceptionally airtight. Assembly spread across 110 sites, with employees aware solely of their isolated roles. The term variable time was chosen intentionally to mislead, implying standard timing mechanisms instead of detection-based ones. Come 1944, much of America's electronics sector focused on these fuses. By the conflict's close, 22 million units would roll off lines, priced at more than $1 billion in 1940s dollars. The Crossley Corporation handled over 5 million on its own, accounting for almost a fourth of the total. These figures highlighted a profound production disparity. As Germany labored over V-1 output via coerced workers, the U.S. retooled its electronics base for fuse creation. Daily output peaked at 40,000. Unit expenses fell from $702 in 1942 to $810 in 1945. Pre-war radio and appliance maker Crosley Corporation hired 10,000 staff, hitting 16,000 daily fuses at its zenith. Sylvania Electric committed its full vacuum tube team to durable parts, manufacturing 400,000 tiny tubes per day, 95% of the total required. The disparity was stark. Germany assembled arms in small batches by hand. America unleashed cutting-edge gear through massive output. U.S. monthly fuse runs outstripped Germany's entire wartime V-1 tally. The proximity fuse embodied remarkable innovation. It endured gun launch stresses, 20,000 grav forces, 25,000 RPM rotation, and harsh thermal shifts. Sylvania adapted hearing aid-inspired mini-tubes, toughened for such rigors. Power cells lay idle for years but sparked to life on demand. A compact radio broadcast signals non-stop. Echoed returns from nearby masses prompted circuit activation for explosion. This deceptively straightforward idea demanded overcoming obstacles that German experts saw as hopeless. Standards of inspection were unparalleled. Each fuse faced rigorous checks, with select batches live fired in proving grounds. Failure rates under 2% showcased extraordinary accuracy amid vast volumes. By September 1944, the V-1 offensive was ultimately thwarted. Out of the 91 V-1s fired from launch sites toward Britain, just 2015 made it to London, resulting in 6,094 civilian deaths and 17,981 injuries. Although devastating, these losses amounted to only a small portion of what the Germans had planned. General Frederick Pyle, who led the anti-aircraft command, estimated that absent proximity fuses, the death toll from V-1s would have been 4 or 5 times greater. This innovation spared London from utter ruin. In response, Germany turned to nighttime launches and introduced the V-2 rocket, which traveled at speeds too high for effective countermeasures. However, these frantic efforts failed to deliver any meaningful strategic blows. The V-1 initiative turned out to be an expensive debacle, squandering vital materials that were urgently required in other areas. The Germans' inability to uncover the proximity fuse stood as one of the most monumental intelligence blunders in history. Even with their vast spy networks and engineering prowess, they remained oblivious to the true nature of the threat. The project stayed classified right up to the war's end. During the entire V-1 onslaught, not one complete proximity fuse ever came into German possession. Astonishingly, in the Battle of the Bulge, German troops seized an American ammo depot stocked with proximity fuses, yet they failed to identify them. Their conviction that such mechanisms were unfeasible prevented them from seeing the proof right before them. Following Germany's capitulation, post-war debriefings exposed their total lack of knowledge regarding proximity fuses. One official, Max Vachtel, informed Allied interrogators that they had theorized about upgraded radar or quicker ignition fuses, but the idea of self-guiding projectiles never crossed their minds. When presented with seized US VT fuses, German experts reacted with incredulity. They struggled to accept how vacuum tubes could endure the launch forces, how batteries could stay operational, or how circuits could work after being fired from guns. They believed their own tech lagged a full decade behind America's. Dr. Merle Tuve, the key figure in developing the proximity fuse at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, later noted that the triumph stemmed from close teamwork among researchers, technicians, and factory staff, a level of coordination that authoritarian regimes simply couldn't replicate. The proximity fuse underscored how World War II's result hinged on innovations from labs and assembly lines every bit as much as from the front lines. As Germany chased after flashy miracle weapons, the U.S. prioritized scalable advancements that boosted conventional arms. The proximity fuse amplified the lethality of each anti-aircraft gun by 5 to 10-fold. Navy Secretary James Forrestal declared, "The proximity fuse has helped blaze the trail to Japan. Without the protection this ingenious device has given the surface ships of the fleet, our westward push could not have been so swift, and the cost in men and ships would have been immeasurably greater." The V-1 effort depended extensively on forced labor. Countless prisoners from concentration camps perished in subterranean plants assembling the V-1s. By contrast, U.S. employees chose to put in extra hours for bonus pay, unaware of the precise purpose of their output, but aware of its significance. At Sylvania's Ipswich plant, more than 5,000 women toiled in 12-hour rotations crafting essential parts. They learned the full story only after the conflict ended. Their efforts had shielded London from Hitler's vengeance weapons. The proximity fuse's confidentiality was airtight. British AA gunners were in the dark about why their rounds performed so well. They received designated ammo under rigorous inventory controls. Each shell loaded with a proximity fuse and aimed at V-1s got meticulously logged. Any that didn't detonate were swiftly recovered. Navy ships cruised the English Channel to block German salvage of failures. This veil of secrecy exacted a price in lives. Allied infantry couldn't deploy proximity-fused shells in ground support until December 1944. Countless troops perished due to the excessive caution surrounding the tech. Still, deploying it against V-1s proved essential. Ensuring London's endurance amid the Normandy landings was paramount. For the Germans, the V-1 campaign siphoned off essential assets while yielding scant battlefield gains. Firing roughly 25,000 V-1s in all cost millions of Reichsmarks and pulled supplies away from sorely needed fighters and tank defenses on contracting fronts. The heavy use of coerced workers lent a profound ethical stain to its shortcomings. The proximity fuse was countering armaments forged amid atrocity, a disparity that became clear only in hindsight. This device epitomized a shift in combat dynamics, triumph via ingenuity and manufacturing prowess rather than reliance on singular superweapons. It affirmed that contemporary conflict pitted entire production apparatuses against one another, beyond mere troop engagements. Prior to safeguarding Pacific naval forces and paving the way for Japan's downfall, the proximity fuse preserved London. The Germans, witnessing V-1's plummet, never fathomed the reason. The breakthrough that bested them lay beyond their conceptual grasp. The change was profound. Prior to proximity fuses, taking down a V-1 demanded an average of 2,500 heavy AA rounds. Afterward, that figure plummeted to 100. Over 10 weeks, the success rate of gunline intercepts climbed from 17% to 82%. Such results didn't arise from bravery or skill alone. Yet, America's edge came not from superior tactics or bravery, but from churning out cutting-edge tech on an unprecedented scale that Germany could neither rival nor fathom. The U.S. had rallied its whole electronics sector, hired more than 80,000 employees, and poured over $1 billion into manufacturing 22 million proximity fuses. This innovative device was made public in September 1945. The War Department's statement kicked off by calling it one of the war's key innovations, outshone in impact only by the atomic bomb. For the German experts baffled by the V-1's shortcomings, this disclosure delivered clarity laced with embarrassment. Their downfall stemmed not from battlefield smarts or valor, but from a manufacturing prowess beyond their wildest dreams. After the war talks exposed the Germans' stunned reactions, they viewed their V-1 as the height of armaments innovation. Discovering it had been thwarted by cheap factory-made electronics under $20 apiece hit them hard. They hadn't fallen to soldiers, but to production lines. The proximity fuse's advancements later fed into today's aerial defense networks, radar height finders, and electronic combat tools. To those ex-German arms specialists, it lingered as an enduring symbol of their wartime short-sightedness. This fuse demonstrated that in contemporary conflict, flooding the field with solid tech outweighs designing flawless armaments. Germany crafted exceptional single pieces. The U.S. churned out practical ones by the millions. That extraordinary late August 1944 moment when proximity fuses down to 82% of the German V-1s forever altered combat's essence. The Nazis firing their reprisal rockets remained oblivious to the unseen tech dismantling them. In their eyes, they'd covered all bases, created sophisticated gear, drilled top-tier teams, notched major advances. Still, they succumbed to everyday electronics mass-fabricated beyond their conception. The proximity fuse shielded London via countless precise blasts, each steered by ingenuity German minds labeled unfeasible. It marked the win of democratic industry against dictatorial design, volume output against bespoke excellence, amplified basic fixes against elaborate miracle arms. The Germans never pinpointed what struck their V-1s as they plummeted in flames, bested by a hidden innovation they couldn't grasp and a productive force they couldn't equal. The proximity fuse reshaped Hitler's payback rocket into London's deliverance, and the Nazis grasped neither the method nor the reason until well after the outcome decided. Ultimately, the U.S.'s biggest triumph lay not amid the fighting, but in workshops where millions of laborers, often women unaware of their output, assembled the minuscule circuits that preserved a metropolis and revolutionized armed struggle for good. That 82% takedown rate from late August 1944 served as irrefutable evidence that in today's battles, raw output can topple even the cleverest novelty weapon. The proximity fuse transcended mere armament. It embodied proof that freedom's knack for harnessing knowledge and production could vanquish oppression's coerced genius. And the Germans, witnessing their ideal creations crash earthward, stayed ignorant of the reason their overlords claimed they were still prevailing in a conflict long lost.